Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Now, it's my privilege today to review a book which I use regularly and many other people do. It's a book you see in all the courts, certainly in the county court. It's the new edition of the Housing Law Casebook, and it's been written by Nick Madge, who many will know of as a judge, and Sam Madge-Wyld. The book's available as a book and an ebook. It's published by the Legal Action Group, which is the Access to Justice charity, and the book's also available on a website. The 7th edition, which is this book here, is the one we're looking at today. We've reviewed previous editions, but this is a particularly important one at this stage because so much has been happening. Let's have a look at the book first of all. It's a heavy book, the heaviest of the lot actually. There's the spine, you can see the basic information there, and on the back you've got quite a lot of information about what's in the book. I'm going to mention a little bit of the content in the review. Now at the back of the book you can see a little bit of shaded area just there. That is actually an appendix, and it is the just after the, in fact it's the index. Sorry, not the appendix, the index. There's the index itself. The index is actually by, again, it's slightly differently structured. It's not by page numbers, it's by the tab number and then a number after it. So, for instance, the first one, abandoned property, is S 4.6, so it's paragraph numbered. I'll show you how that works in the book itself. At the front of the book, we have the basic information. There's the actual title. There's information about the two authors. Then after that, for the 7th edition, got all the blurb about previous editions and information about the website as well. Then you've got the contents section. You can see how it's structured. It's structured in parts. Part 1 is human rights and housing. Then it's A. And then after A, you've got A1, 2, 3, and so forth. Then when you go into the book itself, you will see the paragraph numbering at the sides with the letter, then the numbers. So you should be able to find things very easily. Now, just going back to the front of it again, this is a case book. You can see there's a lot of detail in the contents section. Then you've got the table of cases themselves, and obviously there are a large number. And after the table of cases, we then get to statutes, and then after statutes, of course, we have the statutory instruments. And after the statutory instruments, we have the table of European legislation. There's a certain amount of that. And that will remain irrespective of what happens with Brexit talks and everything else. Then you have an introduction. The introduction is well worth reading, as I've indicated, because it actually covers quite a lot of the changes. The introduction was written in April 2017, and I'm recording this in the summer. Then you get to the beginning. This is the first part, part 1. And then you've got, for each of the chapters, you've got a little short index to show you what's in each of the chapters. Then after that, you've then got all the body of the text itself. Now, you've got a huge amount of information. You can see, for instance, I'm going into this is about landlords. You can see here the actual case, the name of the court, and then the actual information about the case itself. Again, you can see the same sort of thing as we go into the book itself. Owner-occupiers, part 6, you see the same sort of thing again. And then you've then got, you've got chapter 7, long leases, so forth. And then it goes through right to the end. The total size of this is 1,300 pages. So it's actually a massive tome, and the largest. I'll mention that again in a minute. Now, what do we say about the book? Because, as I said, this is the premier book, and I think the most important publication that the Legal Action Group produce. And I say that bearing in mind they produce some very good work for us as practitioners. Probably the most famous, most important and most useful casebook on housing law now available, and I think that's a fairly substantial statement that I've made, but I think that is the case with this particular publication. Housing law is hard law, right? The two expert authors, Nick Madge and Sam Madge-Wyld. Now, I've used that in previous quotes, but it still remains the basic position. And one reason is because of the effect that housing cases can have on people. It's a major area of my practice, and that of, I think, many other common law barristers as junior counsel. So any person involved in housing, in our view, needs this book. It's the largest of the legal action books, this one here, and it's around about 1,300 pages, as I say, with every single page counting. Believe me, it does. Now, do read the introduction as your first port of call, because the results of hearings at worst may result in homelessness for tenants or severe economic problems for landlords, according to the writers, absolutely right about that. They go on to comment that, at best, the hearings may result in the provision of good quality accommodation for tenants or the realisation of substantial economic assets for landlords. So, of course, there can be a great deal at stake with any court hearing. Where we come in as advisors, of course, rests with the conflict of interest between the parties, which is frequently a major factor with cases bitterly fought. So in our view, you need this book as a main point of references. One of the biggest single problems is that of the conflict of interest itself is between what are often destitute homeless people and then the local authorities, where the local authorities frequently don't have the financial resources or organisation to comply with their statutory obligations, given to them, of course, by Parliament. And this is a major bone of contention for any elected member, and certainly for local government officials. Now, the main purpose of this casebook is to give us as practitioners help in tracking down and reading very quickly cases which we know about, although we may have forgotten some of the details. It's more of a common problem, actually, than many people realise, with the massive number of new authorities now available. And of course, it's not just in housing law, it's much wider than that now, because there is so much case law around, and of course a lot of legislation. Now, the title, the Housing Law Casebook, is also a great help to more recently qualified practitioners and the young bar. And it's also highly likely today that many litigants in person will use the casebook. And like all casebooks, it's great for those who don't have ready access to law libraries, like most people. And obviously they do require, of course, short summaries of cases to assist in the understanding of particular areas of housing law. Now, I think that's an important point to make, but a word of caution which is mentioned by the authors is that with all casebooks, don't treat it as a replacement for the law reports. Now, obviously today you've got to pay a lot of money to get access to some of the main law reports, but you do have Bailey, and you should be able to get some of the cases from Bailey. Now, let me conclude by saying that in some of the earlier editions of the work, we commented that the main aim of the authors had been to include all the cases that housing law practitioners will ever need. Now, sadly, but not unexpectedly, that is no longer possible. But in fact, what Nick and Sam have given us here is the best possible service for our own legal practice with the new 7th edition. And is at a time when many areas of substantive law are, of course, in much the same position, where there are quite a lot of changes taking place quite quickly. So the editions are coming up. The 6th edition was 2014, and this has arrived in the 7th edition in 2017. So it's been a relatively short space of time between the previous editions. So it remains for me to say a big thank you, please, to everybody, because if it wasn't for the authors and the legal action group, we would have a more difficult time with the way in which we understand the law, understand the cases and the acts, and therefore know how to make the correct submissions in court. And of course, do remember to contact the authors if you've got any points to make about the new edition, because they're always very happy to hear from you as practitioners. And I think that's something that isn't always said by the authors or the publishers, but I think it's very important to get some feedback if you can. And we believe, of course, the contents of this book for the practitioner cannot be bettered. Now, the law is up to date as at the 8th of February 2017, and as I said, it's available as this paperback and as an ebook. Let's just have one more look at it. There's the front of it there. There is the side, and then there is the back of it, and you can see there's a lot of information on the back. I'll just pull it out a bit. As I said, just opening it up, the index is the shaded bit. Not there isn't an appendix. I don't know why I thought that, but there isn't one, of course, for this. I get a bit confused sometimes. What I do like, though, is the way it's set out. You do have the various types of case. For instance, let me just take this one. These are cases we are talking about the level of court. Now what they do is they start off with the most senior courts, and then you'll get down to High Court and County Court decisions at the bottom. Now can I just say that for quite a lot of people, the County Court today is a very important court in terms of the function for possession actions in particular, and housing law matters in general. So this book, I think, is a real Bible for the district judge as much as anybody else. And I would expect to see this in every major reference library in the country, and certainly in every court. And what I would advise litigants in person to do is, if there's a possibility and you've got a problem, ask the usher if you can have a look at this book, because at least there should be a copy somewhere, and that may assist you depending on what your problem is. And with that, I will just say a very big thank you again to Nick and Sam and everybody at Legal Action Group. Steve Hines as the director as well. Thank you all so much for continuing to produce this book. Bye-bye.